Today's guest kind of reminds me of Peter Thiel, if you're familiar with his story. Started out in big law. He was working at a big law firm, or he was in corporate life, quits, does a few startups, has a VC fund. Very roughly his story. Today's guest, his story is very similar. Worked at one of the largest law firms in the world, the one that Obama's came from, quits. He, does a startup, doesn't go as well, has another startup that gets exited. He's now a venture capitalist. We'll talk a little bit about his story, talk about his journey, talk about some of the investments he's making, the transition over to becoming an investor. So without further ado, Evan, welcome to the Builders and Funders Show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm like flattered and amused by the Peter Thiel reference. I hope, yeah, I hope I can live up to that on at least on this podcast. So
Well, you need a hook, right? You gotta get their attention somehow. They open up the podcast, first thing they hear, it's the next Peter Thiel on the show. I think it's a
right,
good hook.
that's right. Good for SEO.
There you go. Awesome. Let's start with the law career. You're working at this law firm. I think you talked about how that helped you build your VC fund later down the line. Tell me about that part of your life before we kind of go on to talk about some of these other things.
Yeah, well, the law career, I mean, came after startups sequentially. When I was at Vanderbilt, I was taking some entrepreneurship classes. Didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life, but seemed really interesting. And I went to high school and even middle school, I guess, when I was a kid. Facebook was coming out, and I was like on Instagram and Twitter, and just figuring out how these things worked. And I was always really interested in what was going on there, particularly social media. Um, and we were all making crazy mistakes, and it's changed so much in terms of how you use it and what you would say and all this stuff. But so when I got to college, I actually had transferred from a small school. But when I got to Vanderbilt, I started taking business courses, and at the end of one of the classes, my professor, who seemed like a pretty great business dude. It was the lecture was on Web 1.0 and 2.0, or Web 1 and 2, and he at the end of the class was like, "Does anyone want to?" My friend who's an investor and entrepreneur in town wants to work with a smart college student. If anyone wants to like get connected, come up after class. And I was, I think, the only person who walked over. So that led to working with a bunch of startups in Nashville, Tennessee, and starting a company of my own with a friend in college, and reluctantly going to law school after exploring that path. Um, because my Jewish father thought it was a good idea, and it was. I really loved law school, which I'm like the only person who says that. One, definitely less than 1 in 10. Um, but yeah, I explored the law. So I did a few things. I worked at Sidley Austin on Sand Hill Road. It's kind of venture capital um, paradise. There's a lot of great firms there. Uh, so that was my first job out of school, but I had also worked for the ACLU, the Anti Defamation League. Worked for a federal judge afterwards, and then I ended up at Fenwick and West, um, in both Mountain View and San Francisco, and working with startups and venture capitalists. So yeah, I mean, I guess it's just to answer your question, put a little more of a point on it. I think there was this really smart guy I worked with at the ACLU. He was doing like a Yale MBA and a Harvard law degree at the same time, and we were like 24 or something. And I remember him saying something like the phrase was law undergirds everything in society. Like that is why it's important and that is why it's interesting. I think that's probably true about finance in some ways too, but maybe not undergird. Um, Great word, by the way. But yeah, so I think, it's possible to just say, you asked about my law career so far. I mean, it's possible to say I was helping people with their business, or I was helping people with their civil rights, or I was helping, people resolve disputes. all through the prism of law and with the legal background and knowledge and license. But at the end of the day, law is sort of a vehicle to do other things. So it's brought me to some pretty cool places and met some great people and sometimes heavy, but honestly a great experience, but a tough job, tough job.
Hmm. Absolutely. One of the reasons I want to start this podcast was because a lot of people, they see an investor, they see a venture capitalist, and they think, it's just a person who writes a check, but they often have, a story behind them, and a lot of times no one really, I think there is not enough emphasis on these stories, and there is enough storytelling going on, especially with backgrounds of investors, and especially people like you who come from interesting backgrounds. One of the things you were telling me was how you did this legal tech startup, and you have a co-founder who lies to you and fakes their credentials, and your family's having all these health problems. I wanted to talk about that period in your life because, again, someone can go to your website and see you're a venture capitalist and you come from big law and think, man, this guy, he's got it all. He's had a successful life. He, everything seems awesome. But I want to take,
I think I do have it all, by the way. I think I do have a great life.
yeah, of
Um,
course. But like, tell me about that start. Tell me about that first legal tech startup. What happened there?
yeah, well, so essentially, well, I also want to say, I totally agree. I think storytelling is important, but actually having the story is so important, but actually having the experience is what is important, and actually having a thesis or um, a unique point of view or way of seeing the world or passion is important for founders and funders. And I mean, I think if you so I love what you're doing, and I think yeah, sure. I mean, if is going to give you money and you're going to spend it wisely and it's going to help you grow, like great. But if someone's going to partner with you, an investor, or help you with their business, or just co-found a company with you, or work for you, I mean, there are degrees of this, and there are purely transactional, I think, relationships sometimes that work for other people. It's not how I like to live my life, and I have strong but loosely held opinions and beliefs and lots of experiences, and I transform them into like ideas. So, but yeah, at Fenwick, sorry, answering your question, Fenwick spent about 2 years there, counseling companies, sitting in board meetings, advising boards of directors and founders, like super elite founders. And working with VCs and doing venture studio work. So working with brilliant attorneys, great stuff. Um, but there just came a point. Well, yeah, I think I had always wanted to do some entrepreneurial things. Um, I had I had kind of started a company in between the working for the judge and going to Fenwick. Um, and yeah, I mean, a couple of things happened. One of my clients essentially told me to quit. I called them on the weekend. We were talking about application of his technology, and he's like, "Look, you can do this, but you can't. You're gonna have to quit." Um, ChatGPT was making the rounds, and it was evident that this was going to transform law. If it was already evident with ironclad and lots of different technology that law needs, should be, and can be disrupted. But LLMs in particular, and that recent breakthrough, um, I think, were really obvious to a lot of people that it was going to be uh, fast and almost violent. I think the disruption in some ways, and my job didn't seem not a, didn't really love my job, but to be honest, it wasn't the best fit for me in some ways. But maybe just stifling, I think, creatively more than anything. And I think hierarchical structures are very 20th century, maybe. But anyways, and then I found this website, and it just seemed like no one out, not enough. There was such a big opportunity there, and not enough people were thinking about it. So it was a bet, but it felt like, okay, quitting is great, and money. has not really been my top priority in life. So it wasn't necessarily a immediately economically rational decision, nor was it done to get rich. It was just, this seems like there's opportunity and fun there, and change, and like, this is what I want to do, and I think I'm not ready, quote unquote, to do it, but I'm as ready as I'm gonna be. So I left, and then I already had the idea for that first company, going. Um, and since I'm not technical, I started looking, quickly for a technical co-founder, and I found someone pretty fast, who was at LinkedIn. No ill will against this person. I won't identify them, and it's not that relevant. But yeah, I found a co-founder. I think there were some other options, but I wanted to move fast, and I chose this woman, and she just wasn't it, and she didn't commit, even after a couple months. Great designer, not very technical, so maybe we could have added someone else to the mix. But I think you bring someone in to such an intimate space, uh, it's hard to go back. Like, so. Anyways, she didn't want to commit after some time, and that threw a wrench in things, and she wasn't, it was legal tech, she's not a lawyer, she wasn't willing to take that risk, and then she started asking for money or like equity demands, and I just fired her. But that left me, you know without a technical co-founder, and having spending my own money, and continually spending money on development, design, things like that. And I think I probably could have hung in there, but maybe I wasn't meant to do it then. I'm not sure. But my father got sick in the middle of this, or not sick. He fell in the shower, and there were some personal issues there that with that co-founder, my father, my girlfriend at the time, that um, it felt like everything was not going wrong, but just it was a super challenging time, and it felt like the company cannot be the priority, nor will I actually execute well in this like mental state that I'm in. So I shut it down, and drove out to the East Coast, and like left my things, and just said, like, I need like a change of scenery, and I need to kind of get out of here. So yeah.
Hmm. Absolutely. I want to go. One of the things you mentioned when you were kind of answering this was that one of your clients actually told you to quit your job to do this. Can you go back and tell me more about what happened there?
Yeah. Well, basically, he is I think a few years younger than me, from Russia. His name is Max. He runs, I think their company's worth like $4 billion or something now, maybe more. Um, and I think there's this like illusion often, especially when you're not technical and you're in Silicon Valley or SF, and maybe when you go to the car repair guy, and you're not an auto mechanic, maybe when you go to the doctor and you didn't go to medicine, school of medicine, and definitely when you go to a lawyer and you didn't study law, that there's I think it's your brain is doing the same thing as FOMO. It's telling you you're different or worse than this person. You don't understand them. You're scared. You don't want to ask questions. Blah blah blah. That's not really me. I like to ask questions, but I think that feeling, especially when you're a lawyer in big law and working with brilliant people, and especially if they abuse that, or don't aren't nice, or they don't or they take advantage of you. So, for example, your doctor doesn't actually explain what is going on. They're a bad medicinal translator. Your lawyer charges you a bunch of money but doesn't actually help you understand things. Right? The auto mechanic is inarticulate about describing what's going on with your car. I think when that's the case, you think like, oh, I can't, this is unapproachable, I'm stupid, blah blah blah, I can't learn this. But I think being a teacher is really great. Anyways, and I think confidence is really great. So I just reached out to my client, who's young like me. It felt like a peer. We were getting along really well. I also realized he's not very good at what I do during the financing process and being his lawyer. They were a bit unorganized, and it broke the veil for me of like, wow, you can build a $4 billion company and like not be able, and be like, struggle to do certain things, or maybe you have different priorities. So, but yeah, I mean, I reached out to him and he was friendly enough to talk, and we spoke on the phone, and we just had a long conversation about his origin story, why he's doing this, why he's good at it, why they started the company. And I talked about my story a bit, and then I shared some ideas I had for their company. And I don't know if any were particularly actionable at the time, but they must have been fine. And yeah, he just, he's like, well, you're smart and I think you can do this. And if you want to do it, you cannot both be in big law in this setting where you work, 60 hours a week and have a real company outside of that. So, especially not a technology startup or investing like seriously, you could probably own, buy a house or something like that, or buy some property, but that's pretty much it. So, yeah, that's what happened.
Hmm.
He didn't tell me to quit. He told me logically, right? If you want to do the thing, one day you must quit. And it's that simple, right? It's just a sentence.
Hmm. Absolutely. So you have this conversation, you get the startup idea. We talked a little bit about what happened with your co-founder, but around that time, you were also pitching VCs trying to fundraise for this startup, and you were rejected quite a bit. I think one of the things you told me was a venture capitalist straight up tells you if you were a meta engineer, you could have raised over $5 million by now, but and they've got all these reasons as to why they're rejecting you. Love to hear about that period, especially now reflecting on it as a VC yourself, why you think you were being rejected, and what you learned about fundraising during that period.
Oh, interesting. I think lawyers, I think, sorry, investors don't understand legal tech, pretty much, period, is one reason. I think people don't respect in Silicon Valley, and I think people have a little too much uh, praise or blind trust in technical people, and don't respect enough non-technical folks. I mean, at the end of the day, we're selling products. If it, I mean, it can be, bad and fraud. It should work, right? Like Theranos sold things that maybe didn't work, but the customer is the most important thing, and the product is the most important thing. Of course, there's engineering that goes into product, but I think we have it all backwards right now, and a bit of overemphasis on engineering. You don't want to over engineer things either. And you look at like yeah, I mean, uh, Twitter and a lot of places, salaries. I think it's a bit too much on the technical side. Now you want to be technical. You want to be technically savvy and competent, of course. But do you need, I think investors are scared to fund someone who's non-technical, who is a lawyer. It's just an untraditional background, and then clearly that co-founder wasn't committed or maybe the right person, and so that was probably a good call. But I think of backing people in the early stage. So Talok, my fund is a multi-stage fund. We do late stage, things like xAI, SpaceX, like an Anduril, right? But and that's different. I mean, you still are backing founders, but it's quite different when you're backing like an application layer AI company. I mean, they may pivot. They're definitely going to figure out a lot of things out. They're going to add people to their team, but the constant is really kind of the founder, the problem, the vision, the market, and that's pretty much it. I mean, DeepSeek came out, like that changes things. If you don't have a smart, hungry founder that's going to figure stuff out, then good luck. I mean, so and when I say good luck, like that's not a company. Companies are just groups of people that are legally organized to sort of do things. So yeah, in that sense, rejection can be very personal because it is just people telling you, I don't think you can do this. I mean, that is truly what they're saying. Now, they're often wrong. Um, Airbnb, Uber, I mean, all these famous companies, people passed on them. People pass on, people probably dumped Brad Pitt when he was 20 years old, right? Uh, like, but it still is rejection. I'm very sensitive to rejection. I think apparently ADHD makes you more sensitive to rejection. I don't know if you've heard this. I learned this last night.
Hmm. ADHD makes you more sensitive to reject. How does? Okay.
Yeah, right? It's a strange correlation. Well, I think there's a heightened sensitivity overall. Let me let me pull up my log to share with you, but I'll keep going. So what's your question was just like what was the rejection like and how did it affect me or what's the question?
Yeah, well, also like you're getting rejected by these VCs. You one of the things you mentioned when we were having a conversation was a lot of times they reject you. The reasons they give you are a bit of an excuse, and they're not really being honest. And a lot of times it's just they don't really believe that you're the one to do it, or they're sometimes playing politics with you, kind of understanding how the VCs think. I guess the lessons you learn from that period, especially now as someone who sits at the opposite end of the table.
Yeah. Well, and it's called rejection sensitive dysphoria. It's a common feature of ADHD, but you should look it up. But also, I mean, is it dysphoria? I mean, even body dysphoria. If you just don't like your body, is that? I mean, what does dysphoria mean? What does dysphoria mean? Let's see, dysphoria, like gender dysphoria, a state of profound unease, dissatisfaction, or low mood. Yeah, it's not saying you are wrong. It's dissatisfaction. So I think it's valid. I don't think it. I am sensitive to rejection. A lot of people are, but it doesn't mean the rejection wasn't real, and it doesn't mean that's wrong. So I mean, it really. So going through that process really fueled me to learn more about VC and startups. I thought I knew a lot, right? I worked with some of the best firms in the world. People who haven't done that were rejecting me. Um, I was backed by these great, brilliant founders. People with less, startup experience rejected me. People lied to me. Now, at the same time, there were some people that wanted to help me, but and we built some cool things, and I met a bunch of great people. Like it wasn't all bad at all. It was a mixed bag, just like life. Um, but it really lit a fire under my ass, even more so than I had before, and it was a crashing. It was like a crash course in reality. And oh yeah, lawyers don't really lie because we have I mean, I think it's a lawyer thing, but also we have ethical codes. Now, when lawyers do lie, it's terrible. So you can't make that generalization. But I found that all the venture capitalists are politicians. Um, you don't have to be that in law. You can kind of be an asshole because at the end of the day, the contract is the contract or the facts are the facts. But there's a lot of sort of network and subjectivity and interpretation in venture or even with revenue you can there's a lot of yeah, I think subjectivity at the end of the day. um, and so, especially in the very early stage, things are hazy. And again, it's about the people. So, I mean, what I learned is like make myself a better person and go harder. Um, Prioritize and value the people who do tell me the truth because that I like that. And not to like, and to understand why are these people uh, lying to you essentially. And all of this came up earlier for me, but like Sherlock, I think it's a Sherlock Holmes thing. but it's certainly a law thing. I believe it was Sherlock used to sort of ask at the start of a case. There's like a dead body in hanging outside of a window in the English countryside, in this, and there was a, that's what he has, right? That's the death. That's what he's trying to, a murder he's trying to solve. First question: who benefits from this? Um, there's a management thinking principle thing about ask the five whys, keep going. Why do people do it this way? Okay, because it's easier. Why is it easier? I think just asking questions. So getting through rejection, and resilience is like a cliche word, but just whatever you need to do to let go, to process the rejection and accept it as reality and move forward, and then to um and then to like understand, learn, heal, understand what is going on here. You're going to come out of that better. And if you really want to do venture capital or startups, then you're going to be smarter. Essentially, you'll have more information and you'll be stronger. um, and so yeah, and I really wanted to do startups and venture capital, and I didn't want to be a CEO necessarily. At some point I did, where I thought that was right, and I have vision, so I thought that was right. But the thing is, I just want to like create tech and wealth and help people, and so I'll do that as a lawyer. I'll do that as a founder. I'll do that as an investor. I'll do that as an advisor. I'll do that for free. I'll do that for a lot of money. I don't care. And I think when you genuinely have that attitude, uh, it unlocks a lot of things.
Hmm. Absolutely. And then you started your fund thing with a former client of yours while you were moving in the process of moving to Mexico. I'd love to talk about that story as well. And another theme that I saw a lot with your life was the relationships you built. You're curious, you reach out to people, you keep those relationships going. I think there's a lesson in there for the audience as well, because you would not think that years after you'd be starting a VC fund with one of your former clients. But I'd love to talk about how you managed to keep up that relationship as well, which led to something like this happening.
Yeah, great question. I mean, everything was accidental. Everything was accidental, or destiny, right? I have a theory on that, but okay, yeah. So yeah, I had worked for AngelList, which was a short term engagement, and then I just didn't know what I was going to do next. And I was in Boston at my brother's, and an old client reached out to me, young guy, but I mean, we hadn't spoken in about a year. Although I pitched the CEO of his company as one of the first people. I loved their company. I loved their ethics, their vibe, their IQ, and all this stuff. So they invited me to their office, and I explained what I was doing, and um, they were all just very supportive of me. So, anyways, this guy reaches out, Chris, about a year after I'd quit um, my, my law job. And I mean, people are following you online and seeing what you're saying if you're speaking. And so apparently he thought I was smart and all this stuff, and we started working together. And yeah, he helped with the launch of the fund. And um, yeah, I mean, he's great. And relationships are built over time, and I think they're just the best relationships are authentic. I don't know that there's science about building trust with people. There's um, there is what how to make friends and influence people. Never read that book. I think, and I think particularly now, people really do value authenticity. Um, I think you earn trust with authenticity. Now, again, that doesn't. You don't need to be an asshole. You don't need to be mean. You don't. You can bite your tongue. You don't need to say um, everything you're thinking. You should certainly. I don't believe in being cruel. But if you're an ethical person, um, or just a principled person, if you're smart, if you're curious, if you're kind, I mean, there's some, maybe some karmic stuff that can happen to you, but also people are not idiots. They will see that. And again, it's not like the next, I think, yeah, it's not like the next day you're just going to get the reward. And if you do it for the reward, I mean, I don't think that's the right style. It's exhausting and infuriating. I think if you just do it to do it, you will attract people like you, or that, want to work with someone like that. And I mean, I was like depressed when I was in high school because I had that sort of, I mean, there was a lot going on there, and it was an intense environment, but I was the same person and personality, right? Trying to figure myself out. But when you're blocked and people don't see that in you, um, see what you see in yourself and who you really are, it is depressing. And sometimes it takes a change of scenery or some maturity or some failure to change that. But in contrast, when people, smart people the guy who told me to quit, the founder, or this former client, um, when they see you, maybe not all of you, right? And maybe you're not getting married, but they're like, hey, you're smart and I like you and you're funny and I believe in you. Oh, that also is like wind in your sails that I think can carry you so far um, in life. And that's like a relationship. And that's what I try to give to other people. So yeah, I mean, I got a call when I was in Boston basically from him, and kind of kicked it off from there. And then there are connections to Mexico, and so that's partially where the name comes from as well.
Absolutely. Well, Evan, the last thing I want to ask you about before ending this off is what the transition's been like. You've been on the other side pitching VCs, trying to fundraise. Now people come to pitch to you to get funded. What has that transition been like, and what have you learned about, say, evaluating companies and making these investment decisions from that transition?
Yeah, well, I think doing the multi-stage fund is interesting because the late stage companies are no one's pitching necessarily, uh, right, like an open AI to me. No, it's not, Sam Altman's not pitching that anymore. He's pitching to SoftBank, or they're pitching to him, right? Like, so that's a slightly different business. It's a little more, it's still tech investing, but they're different sort of maybe objectives, outcomes at the base level. It's, you want to write a check and own a portion of a great company that um, allows you and your LPs to make money, and is, I think, good for the world. The consumer likes it, etc. So that business, getting exposure to that business is great, and very different than kind of anything I've done before besides the tech investing element. On the early stage, being on the other side of the table, well, it's nice to be honest with people and give feedback. I mean, I think, but it's challenging with bandwidth on both sides. So I think that, um, yeah, I mean, maybe that's the biggest thing is, hey, I only have so much capital. I only have so much time. I can't invest in everyone. But if I find someone really good that I really want to invest in, this is my personality, I'm going to find a way to help them. I'm going to find capital. Um, I'm just going to help them. So I don't know. For me, it's, I think, someone last night, I was at an event at this Stanford alumni kind of investing event, and this guy told me, it was honestly the best compliment I've gotten in so long. He was like, "There's something scrappy about you. I can't put my finger on it, but I like it, and I think like you're successful because of that." And I was like, kind of blown away. I think I had felt that way maybe when I was younger, and I felt you can't like fake scrappy, and you can't like create scrappy. You have to kind of go through the shit. Excuse my part of my French, but you kind of have to go through things. And so that's kind of how I am as an investor. I don't think there are that many out there like that. Um, and I don't think, unfortunately, like I said, blessing and a curse. About maybe ADHD is a blessing and a curse. Life itself, I think some people can view it. I think it's just a blessing, but um, things can be a blessing and a curse in a like a facetious way, I guess. I think it's all a blessing, but the scrappiness is unique and fun. And when you're an investor, I guess you also get to see. I think you have more information about the market. As a founder, the investors are, unless I will give you information about the market, right? Because I want to help you, but not a lot of investors won't or they don't know. So you should talk to other founders about the market. And if it's competitive, they won't tell you either. So you're really in a tough position, I think, as a founder. It might be the toughest job in the ecosystem. And as an investor, yeah, different outcomes, still tough, but you may have more information or maybe more easier to get information, and that's a certain form of power. So and yeah, there are many differences. It's a little hard to capture them all in one response.
Well, Evan, I want to ask you. I know I said my previous question was my last question, but I do want to do a quick lightning round of four questions. I think will help out the audience here. First off, I was curious, what fulfills you outside of work? What do you do outside of work?
I do a lot of different things. I like to be in nature. I like to be around animals. I like to play sports. I like to have conversation. Brain never stops. So yeah, physical activity is the one thing that will kind of quell my brain. But I listen to a lot of music, and I exercise a lot. And then I like to have conversations or do make art, or consume art. Um, that's like not about maybe profit or tech in my free time.
Absolutely. That leads me to my second question. This it'll make sense why I asked the original question, but a lot of founders who are listening to this, they think, man, this guy, he's big law, this startups, now with VC. The impression people get or the stereotype is like you must be working 24/7 behind a computer all day, all the time, working every waking hour. But how do you stay balanced, or how do you make sure that you're not going overboard with work?
Oh, I go overboard. I went overboard when I started like working. But and not in an unhealthy way, but I'm all in. But and I think I am on 24/7. Well, I sleep, of course. And when I sleep, I go in airplane mode, right? So I sleep. I think that's my answer. But no, I think you have to find ways to like block your email out, or just not check your email. Go on a date and just like go to a movie and just watch the movie. Like go to dinner with your partner and just eat the dinner, um, and trust that you know uh, the deal is going to be that like it's not the end of the world. But balance is also, I think, man and machine, right? So you can't be on the computer all day, and that's what's wrong with, I think, big law, and a lot of white collar jobs, that you're sitting all day and you're on a device, or desktop. I think go they say touch grass. I don't think that's that helpful. Like go like wrestle someone, go like lift weights, go do physical things, go get sunshine. um, don't sit all day. Don't be on the device all day, but also like change your brain. Like it doesn't. I'm an intense person. You don't need to meditate all day to be balanced. Maybe I'm just gonna go think about other things, or uh, yeah, just find ways to maintain the activity level, stay healthy, because it's a long game, and that looks different for everyone. So
Hmm. You mentioned wrestling. You can always go to Russia, pull a Habib, wrestle a baby bear or something. Heard that could de-stress you quite a bit. But what about one of my favorite questions to ask, and we'll do a quick lightning round with the last two questions is what are companies that excite you the most right now or most exciting deals that you're looking at with your venture fund?
Yeah, I think I love xAI. Grok performance is getting stronger. There's so many proprietary data sources and ways to roll that product out into the world, and I think it's uh, undervalued right now by the market, and it's very early in AI period adoption. So um, I love that company. There's a legal tech I backed that's doing sort of rule based contracts and playbooks uh, with the vision to democratize law and to enable um, lawyers to basically sort of white label software and expedite work and automate things for the consumer. Mostly to start for business law, but there's no reason you can apply that to everything. So I love that space and concept. It's partially what I was trying to do with different legal tech startups I was at and started. So that's cool. Yeah, I like those two. And I'm always looking for more. I'm getting more and more interested in robotics because of probably like cartoons I watched as a child.
Absolutely. And last question is if someone's listening to this going, man, I want to pitch Evan, I want him to become my investor, want to get in touch with him, how should they do it? Not just, channels they can reach out, but what kind of style should they take? How do they get your attention?
There's so many cool ways to do this. I've never seen someone. I just had this thought like go to my Twitter and like flirt with me on Twitter and show me how smart and funny you are and then send me an email. Like that sounds great. um, but I am multimodal. I'll check everything. So like LinkedIn and email, Twitter, yeah, and like I don't know, like figure out if it's a good fit and give me a pitch, but don't waste my time and probably breadcrumb it. So I had someone tastefully, tease what they're doing, set up a call, respect my time. I think we spoke for like 15 or 20 minutes. Then they sent a deck. I think that's a nice way to do it. Your resume sort of can speak for itself usually of like, oh yeah, you went to Princeton and you sold this company. I mean, like I can figure it out. You don't have to uh, give me too much. So I guess I think what I said is like flirt with me and withhold some information and email and Twitter.
Does the flirting also work if you're a guy? Is there a specified
Yeah,
gender?
yeah, that's what I'm. No. That's what I'm. No. I've actually this experience has. Yeah, I'm not saying romantically. I mean, flirting is this push pull concept, and I think it's can be used even subconsciously to generate like you or attract attention or generate desire. It doesn't mean romantic, but that you bring that up. It's like the word. The worst part of being a VC so far has been there's been some ethnic diversity that I've seen in the market. Haven't met many female founders, to be honest. So that's a shame in a way, but I not. I'm still like studying why that might be, but yeah, I think I don't know. I don't know that I have a position, but just an observation. And since you brought it up.